702.
World of Work.
On our World of Work feature today, I want us to really focus some attention on this issue of underemployment. Because in addition to unemployment, this country also struggles with underemployment, where individuals are working at jobs that don't fully utilize their skills, that don't fully utilize their experience or even qualifications. Or they're working part-time when they prefer full-time. So it's not the same as being unemployed, but it's a situation where a person is working, but not at a job that adequately reflects their abilities or needs. And I think a lot of us know of someone in our lives who has got specific skills or a specific qualification, but they are forced to do work that is not aligned with that because they just can't find a job in their field of work. So we need to talk about underemployment, particularly among the youth, because there are millions of people that are struggling to find full-time work or are being underutilized in their current jobs. And while the overall underemployment rate seems to be slightly declining from the pre-pandemic levels, there are many workers that still face limited hours and a lack of opportunities for higher skilled positions. So I want you to know from you, I want to know from you if you are someone maybe who is underemployed. How are you navigating that? What's the reason for you to be? I mean, we know that, people are really struggling to get jobs, but how have you been navigating that? And have you now settled in that employment, even though that's not aligned with the skills you have or the qualifications you have? Have you been underemployed? Have you been underutilized, and how have you navigated that? You can call us on 011-883-0702 to share your thoughts with us, your inputs, or send us a voice note on 072-702-1702. Phelisa Nkomo is a developmental economist who's going to guide us through this conversation. Phelisa, thanks for making time. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Clement. Good morning to your listeners.
Let's start with just briefly explaining from your own understanding what underemployment is and how it differs from unemployment.
Firstly, I just want to say that this is such an important conversation in South Africa. Not that unemployment is not. I think our focus has always been on unemployment, which is people who don't have access to work opportunities, who don't earn any income. Underemployment, in simple terms, it's when people either have occupied a job unto which it does not use fully their skills, nor they are misplaced. So a simple example, a young person studies to be a biochemistry specialist, and then they become a receptionist. That's underemployment, right? Mm-hmm. Firstly, they're not only misplaced in as far as what they studied for, but also they are completely doing something that's completely different, so they are underutilized. The income they earn is lower, but also it means that intellectually, society is not able to draw the dividend that it had invested in her while she was studying the science, right? Because for every young person who enters a schoolroom, that's a social investment. So all of us, through either it's through a tax or from a family perspective, you support, etc. So in every young person who goes to school, there's a point where society must be able to draw its dividends. So if you then experience higher underemployment, so it would mean that society is actually not getting what it invested onto in the individuals. So in the South African context, we have underemployment in different sectors. I mean, the highest sector, in fact, you have agriculture, manufacturing sector, and the transport sector. And of course, it changes. And it changes because it's influenced by the dynamics at a sectoral level. And in fact, this is actually a norm across the African continent. And thirdly, because we've not been able to grow strong economies a lot more robustly, particularly the small, medium enterprises. In fact, some people that are actually underemployed in South Africa in the informal sector. Someone starting to become a teacher, and then they find themselves selling tomatoes and onions, right? Someone else has started to be in transport logistics, and then, they find themselves becoming an administrator. So, and the longer we we take to deal with what we call structural challenges in the economy, you get a lot more people who are then underemployed, including those who are actually completely out of work. I mean, the data shows that above 60% of young people are socially and economically lead unproductive life, meaning as we speak, they're bursting in the sun or in the cold, right? And so when you look at the data, so a combination there is that some have dropped out, right? But also some of them actually qualified and have been looking for opportunities. But because the structural transformation in our economy has actually came to a standstill, I can't even say it's slow because we've been talking this language for the last 30 years. Our economy has been growing at less than 2% literally in the last 10 years. So that's a strong indication that economic stagnation will lead into two parallel things. One, the underemployment, and then as well as the unemployment.
So how prevalent is it, this underemployment? I mean, and how have the figures changed in recent years?
Well, I mean, as I said, that it is prevalent, but it's also influenced by dynamics of different sectors, right? So, for instance, data shows that we, as of 2021, 2022, we're sitting at 5.5% of the underemployment. But of course, what is happening in South Africa? We are measuring time-related underemployment instead of underemployment, and I know that has to do with the fact that because we experience so much high unemployment, I suppose the stats essay has not really begun to dig down and actually say, if you are actually employed, Clement, what did you study for, right? So you are now at 702, but what did you study for at university? Did you actually study journalism, or you studied construction, built environment, or you were meant to be in the built environment? So the data only shows people who are part-time. So in essence, people who would be wanting to work longer, let's say, 8 to 9 hour shift, but they can't. They just work for 5 hours, right? That's what we're measuring. So that's the data that is available. But overall, in terms of the economy, we're sitting at 4.5%. And part of it is that when you look at that number, it might appear very small, right? And that's why I'm making an emphasis that what we are measuring, we're only measuring part-time work. We are not measuring people who are currently sitting behind the desk, but having studied for something else, but actually doing something else. Now, there's something else as well, obviously. We must also make a distinction. There are people who have been mobile in their careers, right, by choice. Because that's another thing as well, is that where people would have studied science, but also they realize that, no, actually, you know what, I actually like engineering, right? We've seen, for instance, in South Africa in the last decade, people leaving the financial service sector, going into philanthropic activities. Those ones, they're living by choice because they feel that I've accumulated sufficient capital. I want to just diversify and move on. I mean, I met someone recently who was a herbalist. He's moved now completely into computer science. So those are the people that you don't classify as an underemployment.
Because that's voluntary, right? But what are some of the root causes of underemployment? What do you think are some of the key driving forces? Because I often wonder if there's a mismatch between the skills that people are getting, the qualifications being produced by universities, these careers people are studying for, and of course what the labor market, the job market is in demand of. What has been your assessment?
No, the basic issue is availability of work. That's the first issue, right? Now, availability of work is linked to the state of the economy. So if you have sectors of the economy whose industrial output, particularly manufacturing sector, because it's such a strategic sector, I mean, it's really the belly of any country's economy. So amongst the key things it does is that it absorbs more workers. It absorbs semi-skilled workers. It absorbs unskilled. It absorbs highly skilled workers and extremely technical. So it's probably one sector, unlike primary sector. Primary sector really looks at primary production, and sometimes their requirement for skills are actually quite limited, and as well as even tertiary sector. So So one of the key things that South Africa has experienced, I mean, even this was pre-1994, I think also even globally, since 1973 when we had the oil crisis, countries started experiencing deindustrialization. But South Africa had experienced it a lot more faster post-democratic dispensation for a number of things. One of those was when South Africa took up membership at World Trade Organization, it meant that it needed to liberalize its economy. It was liberalizing its economy on the back of several things. So the first one was that we only had 6 to 8% of citizens who were exposed in true economy, which is in this context, it was white people. So black people were servicing the white economy, meaning that they were only interfacing with the economy by selling their labor. So in essence, then when you liberalized, it meant that anything else, anyone else wants to sell and trade with South Africa. And South Africa was then compelled to liberalize and open up its market. Let's make an example. The textile industry. It's one of the sectors that needs to be strong, and even fabric manufacturing, etc. I mean, today we're probably sitting with less than 5 million plants who are doing fabric manufacturing. So I'm giving this history because it's important to understand that trade liberalization also meant that people who wanted post-democratic dispensation, who wanted to start infant industries, could not get support from the state because the rules of a World Trade Organization is that you can't do import substitution by supporting infant industries, right? It also then meant that South Africa now was not only vulnerable, but its industrial capacity was actually dwindling because you have so many goods that are coming through. In fact, data shows, Clement, to date, that our industrial output as a country has declined from 44% in 1994 to 19%. And in simple terms, it says that almost 81% of the things that you consume in this economy are coming from outside. So then there's then a natural link now between the economic performance, our industrial output, underemployment, and unemployment. So we've just had increased now unemployment. So, and obviously it means that once the economy still grows at 1%, firms are compelled to restructure, but also it means that the small, medium enterprises are completely exiting out because they're struggling, they have no access to markets. And then it means that obviously from an industrial development perspective, then the state needs to go into the drawing board. Of course, in our case, we've even had now, the knock from the tariff issues from the US, right? So the agro sector, for instance, citrus industry products in the American market are likely to be uncompetitive because of those tariffs. Because ultimately, every producer has to transfer the cost of those tariffs to the consumer.
Yeah, got it. It's 21 minutes now after 11 o'clock. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'd like to hear from our listeners as well, Phelisa, to share their experiences with us. Are you underemployed? Do you have skills that you have or a qualification you have, but the job you're currently doing doesn't align with that? And as Phelisa said, we're not talking here about voluntary decisions, like where you've just decided, I want to move to a new industry. We're talking about people who are compelled to start doing certain jobs because they are just not being absorbed in the industry where they can utilize their skills efficiently. Give us a call or send us a WhatsApp voice note on 072 702 1702.
702. World of Work.
25 minutes after 11 o'clock, we are discussing underemployment on our World of Work feature this morning. Let's go to your WhatsApps on 072 702 1702.
Sure, Clement. This is Tabang from Midlands. Clement, I find myself driving a taxi, yet I'm a journalist. I've been trying to get something, even if it's freelancing, but I can't because of this unemployment and lack of job opportunities. So I'm here driving a taxi, listening to you and thinking that I can do what Clement is doing. I can read news. I can do sports. But because of lack of opportunities, I'm finding myself here beating the water, taking people to town and back to Soweto. But I have not given up. I know that my opportunity will definitely come. And I'm busy knocking on doors. Thank you very much, Clement.
Good morning, Clement. I really love this topic because as young people, we have been complaining about how the school system is set out. We are taught how to work for somebody else's vision. We are not taught to be entrepreneurs. We are not taught financial stability. We are not taught planning. We are not taught a lot of things that can help with what employment is. We were having this discussion a few days ago with some of my friends, and we're saying it's so funny how we used to tease people that would go to the technicon or the technical, where people invest in actually learning how to do the job, versus us going to universities and these varsity private colleges where we are taught theory. So we still have a long way to go. And again, how South African system is also scheduled, or okay, I don't know what the right word is, but basically they teach us things that we do not excel in. We are an agricultural country, but they still push maths and science. That is wild and crazy for me. Prudence from Campton Park.
Good morning. I just wanted to throw in the span in the works that the environment of work is going to change dramatically in the next 2 to 3 years, and a lot of people should just kid themselves with the mentality of being self-employed. People are going to be trading amongst each other, and as a result, the skills that they may have gathered over the years or in tertiary or TV colleges and so on have to then be utilized by the individual. The idea of just being employed is going to soon be a thing of the past. A lot of companies are gearing up to minimize the need for human labor. They'll be using AI and robotics. So yeah, the game has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Phelisa Clement. I hold a financial management N6, but I'm a petrol attendant. Another one says, Clement, I'm a project manager across all sectors by profession. After getting retrenched, I cannot get back into doing my forte. I have had to learn other areas, and I'm now a project coordinator, earning a third of what I would earn as a project manager. This affects us single moms in the worst way. You're either too educated or undereducated, and this country is stagnating our lives in such a bad way. Phelisa, what is it that we can do? Because I mean, I don't know if policy changes or other interventions could actually help us, because for as long as you said, if the economy continues to be stagnant and it's not growing at the rate it should for us to be producing jobs for the many millions of people that need them, then I don't know what we could do. Or maybe we could draw examples from, maybe there are international models or examples that our country could look to for some inspiration.
Mm-hmm. No, correct. But let me start at the point. I think one of the very first caller was reflecting about the education system. She's absolutely correct, because one of the basic issues that we've not been able to grasp, particularly from a public planning or public governance perspective, is the interlinkages between our allocation of resources for education and the economy. Because the education is actually foundational work, and the participation in the economy is an enabler. So it means that if the quality of education that is provided in society is that even the very economy that's meant to be enabler is not going to be able to enable people to live their lives, because it's either not going to absorb them, because whatever skill they have is not demanded. So there's going to be supply and demand. There's a supply and demand issue. And then the second issue, one of the callers makes a very good point around that as long as we take longer to address both unemployment and unemployment, in fact, the crisis is a lot more bigger, because firstly, with AI coming through, and that a lot of actually people who don't have data-related qualifications are not likely to be highly demanded. That's going to be the second thing in the labor market. And of course, he makes a very good point that we're going to start trading with each other. So meaning that The entry point there he's raising is correct. It's going to be small, medium enterprises. In fact, there are several things that you need to intervention, so you need to undertake to deal with this. Firstly, deal with the education sector. So there must be a clear human development strategy aligned with your industrial development. So if, for instance, you're still teaching, or if young people today are still using, let's just say 2002 textbook in 2025, for instance, right? And you are hoping that they're going to join the labor market, or in 2 to 3 years. By the time they come out, firstly, they are reading a textbook that is probably 10 years old. That's one. But also, two, it means that by the time they join the job market, everything else is likely to have changed. And so as long as that conversation, and you hardly see here in South Africa, a conversation between universities and industrial developers, right? Particularly the economic cluster. Because what the industrial development strategy must do, it needs to say this is what we want, and then university must start designing the program. And this it's about even high school, for instance. I think from what we experience in South Africa, entrepreneurship must become one of the subjects that are actually mandatory, for instance, right? Because then in that way is that you are actually not building a critical skill for young people, but you want young people to spot opportunities. Because every problem, by the way, always creates an opportunity or a business opportunity for a true entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Phelisa, unfortunately, we're out of time there. But I think, you've really given us some things to think about. This is something we need to make sure that there's alignment, whether it's our education system. There's so many things to look at, even with our economy, and pushing that, because that fundamentally is what then helps us eradicate this crisis of underemployment. Phelisa Nkomo is a development economist talking to us about underemployment. It's